The great outdoors is one of the greatest things about Texas and the rest of the country. City folk and country folk alike have sought solitude and delight in fishing, hunting, and touring the scenic wonders of America. Today there's an exciting new development in travel and outdoor recreation. Ecotourism, or nature tourism, is proving that environmental conservation and economic rewards go hand in hand. In this program, we will meet some of the pioneers in this field who will share their experiences and insights. Starting with his interest in birding and his service on the boards of the Houston and National Audubon Societies, Ted Eubanks has developed a business of researching and developing nature and historical tourism throughout the U.S.
I mean, that's a fundamental, cardinal rule. We conserve what we use. And we conserve those things that we value, and that value comes through that use. And so if people were using these resources for recreation, then I should be able to tie conservation into that equation. Okay, we care about this because we use it. We conserve it because we use it. That's really what all this is about. And one of the things we started off with is, my God, if we have all these people looking at birds and they care about this sort of thing, what about those people that may not use it but would derive economic value from having people visit, travel and tourism? And then start taking those numbers and going to Mission, Texas, or Hidalgo, or Grand Island, Nebraska, or wherever, and saying, look, you need to understand what this, the Platte River is not just a lot of cranes. It's also about $40 million a year in economic impact coming for people who want to see those cranes, that relationship. And so we've been able to open doors that would have never been open before. We undervalue our coastal resources. We have valued them traditionally on what they can provide us from an extractive sense. So they're either a good fishery, or we can build our petrochemical plants down there because there's water and we can use barges, or we can whatever. You know, we always have this long list of things that we could do with the coast. But we've been very slow in coming to the realization that, you know, that these places left alone have great value. I mean, look at Padre Island. I mean, talk about a brilliant move. Here today, after it was, you know, the incredible moves in those early days to make sure that it's conserved, we have the longest undeveloped barrier island in the world. In the world. What an unbelievable treasure. What a way to be able to develop a sustainable travel and tourism program that can carry you into the future. And that's one of those icon sites, one of those places where you can go, stand on the edge of the water, and it's like it was when Audubon came in 1837. Ignore the bridge, just look back over the bay. It's like it was. Allows you to sort of be transported back in time. That's the sort of thing I like my grandkids to be able to do, to be able to go to the same place I went, you know, and be able to see virtually what I saw.
For years, the Texas Gulf Coast has been a favorite spot for devoted bird watchers that number almost 70 million nationwide. Together, they spend up to $16 billion a year on their hobby, and $900 million a year are spent in Texas alone. For the proponents of ecotourism, capturing this market was a natural first step. Winnie Birkett is a biologist and ornithologist who has managed coastal bird sanctuaries for the Houston Audubon Society.
And it's interesting, like in Galveston, there was a kelp gull, and that's a South American bird. And one woman who lives in Galveston kept a guest book, kind of. She would drive down there to the beach where the gull was every day and ask people to sign this book to find out how many people had come. Well, she had, I think it was 2,000 or 3,000 people signed the book, but how many people came when she wasn't there, we don't know. But the local state representative said to me at a meeting, she said, I just wish we could find more of them gulls like that bring all those people. It's sure easier than trying to do any other kind of economic development. So they do become aware of it. And when you start to talk about, you know, people coming to Galveston to see a bird, talking about 3 meals in a motel, and rent-a-cars and motel and airlines, and because people really do come from a long ways away. So in a place like the Valley, which has so many unusual birds, it's millions and millions of dollars. And they're capitalizing on that. You probably know about the World Bird Center that they're going to put down there, and all kinds of facilities to try to attract more people and also to try to raise the community's awareness. Because ultimately ecotourism is wonderful, but the great thing about ecotourism is that you make a community aware of the fact that the community as it is, with its natural attributes, not with malls, not with fancy roads, not with big movie theaters, the community with trees and grass and shrubs, that's the valuable part. And that's the only way we're going to get habitat saved in a lot of these areas, is for them to realize that the natural things are important to bring money into their community.
Jesse Grantham is a field botanist and ornithologist. While working as a sanctuary and research manager on the Gulf Coast, he became one of the early pioneers of ecotourism.
So we were riding around thinking, what can we do? How can we get people in this community interested in protecting the resources of the community? And we drove into a driveway to turn around over in a little town called Bayside, which is on the west side of Copano Bay. And in front of us there were some hummingbird feeders, and there were about 200 hummingbirds around these feeders feeding at the sugar water that had been put in there. So we sat looking at this event because I had never seen anything like this before, and this was in September during the height of migration, hummingbird migration. I didn't know that at the time. And I said, boy, that is absolutely amazing thing to see. That's a natural history phenomena taking place. You can't see anything like that on the Discovery Channel on TV. And here it is, live and up front and right in your face. What an experience for people to be able to witness this kind of thing going on. And I said, we ought to create some kind of an event out of this, using the hummingbird as a vehicle, as a leverage to bring awareness to that bird and the habitat needs of that bird, and that maybe there would be some economic spin-off from this. And we had a meeting, and I gave a program about hummingbirds and how I thought that they could impact this community, and that was sort of the beginning of a little seed of ecotourism, that people would come to Rockport to see hummingbirds in the fall after Labor Day, when most of the restaurants and bed and breakfasts and motels really go into a slump or close down altogether. It's the end of the tourism season, that you could have people coming back into the community, pump up the economy again, and take advantage of a natural history phenomena that you have in the community. And then, unlike a circus, the money stays in the community. When a circus comes to town, when the circus leaves, your dollars are going out of town with the circus. They're not staying in the community, whereas in this particular case, money's going to motels and restaurants and gas stations and all the amenities that people have, grocery stores, etc. And the estimated number of people that visit the Hummingbird Celebration now is about 4,000 to 5,000 people during a 4.5-day event in Rockport. And it's estimated about $1 million comes into the community in one way or another, directly associated with the Hummingbird Celebration.
Ignacio Garza, a longtime advocate for the Rio Grande Valley, is a former mayor of Brownsville and has also served as chairman of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Commission.
I'll never forget one time when I was the mayor, and I went to visit my parents and pulled into the driveway, and there was like 2 vans of people stopped in front of my parents' house. And they get out and they have cameras and they have binoculars, and at first I thought they were here to interview me or something must have happened in town that I wasn't aware of or whatever. And I was watching them, and they were looking at the little wild, the parrots and parakeets that are wild flying here in Brownsville now, because their habitat was destroyed in Mexico, so they had to migrate to where there was habitat, and the trees in the neighborhoods are their habitat. So we have flocks of wild parrots and parakeets now in the city of Brownsville that we didn't have when I was, growing up. Fairly recent that these type of concentrations have occurred. But the people were there to view them. And I said, well, where are you from? Well, I'm from Michigan, and I'm from Indiana, and I'm from somewhere else. And they all had expensive cameras and expensive binoculars, and they were on a tour that somebody had arranged for them to come see birds. And it dawned on me, well, they're spending money in the hotels and they're spending money in the restaurants, and they came to see those little birds. So we're going to take care of those little birds. These resources we have, and probably resources we've taken for granted, really can draw people. So we came up with a designation, rules and designations of wildlife habitat areas. So we could go stick a sign on it that says, Brownsville Wildlife Habitat Area. And so we wouldn't have code enforcement officers who wanted to go in there and mow it down, that we could preserve it. And so that forced us to think in terms of resources within the city, habitat, pieces of brush or small areas that were habitat and had value because of the birds that they attracted.
The changing seasons bring annual migrations of birds both north and south across the Gulf of Mexico and the Rio Grande. It also brings bird watchers from across the nation to South Texas, some for short visits, others setting up camp for months near locations like Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge.
How long have you been coming down here to watch the birds?
Oh, to watch the birds. Probably we've been coming down here to Texas about 10 years, but birds, probably when we discovered Santa Ana, I would guess, wouldn't you?
Probably about 8 years.
I would guess. I love the green trees and the green grass and the swaying palm trees and the blue skies and the flowers. That's what attracts us.
It's just very nice here.
To me, it's like being in Michigan year-round because, of course, spring is beautiful and summer is beautiful and fall is beautiful. And the snow is beautiful, too, but we're getting kind of old and it gets pretty cold.
There's a green jay right there.
Where is he?
Right there on the tree. You see him?
Oh, there he is. Okay. He's beautiful.
There's two of them.
I never tire of seeing them because they are so beautiful.
Reverend Tom Chelly is a pastor in Harlingen and a skilled birder who has worked to promote bird watching and conservation in the Rio Grande Valley through his newspaper column and local television show, On the Birding Trail.
I think there are certain times of the year, if there's a birdathon going on, that we'd love to get involved. It's fun. It's the sense of the competition, see how you can put together a logistical strategy that'll help you get as many species as you possibly can in a 24-hour period. There's also the aesthetic aspect of it. I think birding has so much for everybody. You can work at it from a scientific perspective, depending on what you like to do. And that's what I like about birding. On one given day, you can play it as a sport. Another day, you can get into the behavioral aspect of a particular species, or you can get into population diversity, things of that type. So it's fun to do. But I don't think I'd like to see it restricted in my own life as basically primarily a scientific pursuit or an aesthetic pursuit or a competition. I think it should be a little bit of everything. It kind of satisfies me more that way.
I'm an artist, and I got started birding so I could know the birds better and know how to paint them, draw them, and so I've done a lot of birding in the Cherokee Mountains, and then when we started coming down here in the wintertime, well, this is a real good area to see the different species, and it has a lot, usually has a lot to offer. I haven't seen anything today.
How long have you been coming down?
We've been coming to Texas in the winter for 3 years now. Last year we got to see the blue bunting, which is rare, that comes in the oriole and the green jay. Of course, you can't see almost anywhere else except in this vicinity, like the Benson State Park or the Santa Ana. This is about the only place you can see those two. So,
do you have quite a life list by now?
Last time I counted, it was only a little over 300, so that's not very that's not a lot compared to most birders, you know, real birders. So.
And when you come down to the other end of the United States, down here in South Texas, what do you hope to see?
Well, every day I expect to see the Altamara oriole and green jays, and of course the chachalajas and the gold-fronted woodpecker. And but I have certain birds I just like to see every day. I'm not a bird counter. There's a big difference between bird counting and bird watching.
Can you explain what the difference is?
Well, every year when I get down here and I put my scope, I've got a rather expensive Leica scope, and every year when I put it on that first Altamara oriole, I get just as big a thrill as the first time.
I see.
And most people, all they want to see the oriole for is to add to their life list.
While birdwatching provided an introduction to ecotourism, advocates quickly realized that Texas had more to offer than coastal vistas and migratory flyways. Most of the best watchable wildlife, as these animals have been described, is found on private property, and over 95% of the land in Texas is private property. So to counter the often delicate relationship between landowners, agencies, and conservationists, Texas pioneered programs which use funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to give grants and awards to people who manage a good habitat for wildlife. This investment brings the additional economic benefits of environmental tourism. Andy Sansom has served as the director of the Texas Nature Conservancy and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. He currently teaches at Texas State University.
You caused an effect that really cascaded among all landowners, because they would go, well, I would like to have one of those signs on my fence, or I'd like to potentially receive that award as well. And so that has caused a tremendous amount of growing interest in private land stewardship. I think the final thing has been to try to find. Yesterday, I was visited I participated in a conference in which the growing use of birding trails in Texas was discussed. That is, highway trails which are established for the purpose of bird watching. And many of the sites along those birding trails, now there's one on the Texas coast, there's one up through the hill country, and there's going to be one in the Panhandle, and soon one in East Texas. Most of the sites along those birding trails are on private property. And the landowners have asked to be a part of it because they may actually have a little bed and breakfast that they've set up on their land, or they've got somebody on the property that's willing to sort of serve as a guide to take someone out and see a rare species. To help them find ways of, once again, increasing the economic return on their property through various consumptive and so-called non-consumptive uses of wildlife.
Jim Bill Anderson operates the Frying Pan Ranch north of Canadian Texas in the Panhandle. Recognized for his management of cattle and wildlife, he now nets more income from his birding and hunting clients than from his livestock operations.
As our lifestyle becomes, more and more unique or endangered sometimes, I've found that people are just as interested in what I do on a daily basis, or how I make a living, or what my family does, as they are observing the different birds or hunting a deer. And so it all just meshes really well. And it's just another reward for good land stewardship practices. If you've overgrazed your land and you've ruined the habitat for certain species, not only will you lower your gains on your per head per day on your cattle because of not enough forage, but you've also lost an opportunity to charge somebody to come observe these native species in their habitat. Of course, I've been mainly involved with the birding because we have a large population of lesser prairie chickens, and we have several prairie dog towns that we've allowed to exist. The prairie chicken was an easy thing to start with because there's very few places left in the world where you can go and see 30 or 40 different leks or booming grounds for prairie chickens in a morning if you wanted to, or over a 2 or 3 day period. The experience of watching prairie chicken boom, if you've never done it, it's a lot of fun. It's quite entertaining. I've done it all my life, and I still get excited when I see them. And one thing we've found that I would never thought of is the people that love to see the stars because the sky is black and there's not any light pollution here at night, of course, and they just get excited about it. Now, it's clear the sky is how bright the stars are. The bulk of them have been people who just want to kind of experience it. They're not hardcore, astronomers or birders. Some are. I prefer the people that want to go to the museum and who want to see the stars and want to see the birds. I enjoy the ones who come and stay 2 or 3 days and actually enjoy walking down a brick street or sitting on a bench on Main Street, and just kind of soaking up the slower pace and the lifestyle. That's who I try to pursue.
Whether it is enjoying animals or studying stars, ecotourism has many facets. The developing area of botany tourism is spurred on by the interest in sustainable agriculture and traditional medicines. Ethnobotanists, experts in the chemical composition and traditional uses of plants, share this knowledge with visitors and students of all ages. Benito Trevino lives in the South Texas brush country of Starr County on a ranch that has been in his family since Spanish times.
Imagine you go into a library and you're walking through aisle and aisle and aisle of books, all kinds of books. And to you look at them and they're just books. And then all of a sudden you stop at an aisle and you see a book and you become kind of interested and you pull it out and you read it. Man, it's like another world. I said, picture that here. Because if it'd be anybody else, you'd be walking here and you'd be looking at green stuff. But when I'm with you, all of a sudden I'll stop and I'll point to that plant and I'll tell you, did you know that this is Manzanita? It's called Barbados cherry. And this plant is edible and it's a medicinal plant. It has anti-inflammatory substance in it, and my grandfather, my father, and even I used it when I was young. I got kicked by a mule one time in my leg, and it kicked me so hard that it swelled. And before I panicked, my father said, "Okay, son, don't panic, don't move, stay right there." And he ran to the brush, and he brought a piece of this plant with him, and he tore all the leaves apart, and he chewed it to get it moist. And then he applied it to my leg, and he took his handkerchief off his neck, and he wrapped it. I said, and I had been kicked before when I was by myself. And God, man, I felt relief within a couple of hours. I could walk. And then I expected 2 or 3 days later to be a big bruise in my leg. No, none of that. Because the use of this plant. So here we had that use. If it was producing berries and we were hungry, we could make a jelly. We could take it inside the house and make a jelly. And I repeat this almost plant after little history, little things. So to them, it's like, man, you are right. This is like a library. So I get excited, and I think the excitement transfers onto the group, and they leave here really, really excited.
To fulfill its potential, ecotourism will require the support of local governments, chambers of commerce, and business owners. A successful program like the Great Texas Coastal Birding Trail links the natural attraction, birdwatching, with the history and culture of the small towns through which it passes. This innovative partnership among Texas Parks and Wildlife with the state and federal agencies can serve as a model for others.
See, it's an interesting way of interlinking all of these different information sources and recognizing that if the primary way people find their way to nature is through recreation, then let's maximize benefit from that recreation. And that's precisely where many of the environmental groups who see recreation as being demeaning, I mean, come on, we're out there saving the world, recreation just for fun, really miss the boat. Not understanding that's the way people define their relationship with the outdoors, is through their recreation. But it's also, I think, sort of highlights that contrast we were talking about with some of the birding groups or just the recreation-only groups, which is we're missing an unbelievable opportunity to relate to the public, to make sure they understand why it's important that these places exist.
The potential for successful ecotourism is great, but it requires planning to ensure that overdevelopment and unrealistic expectations don't overshadow the goals of conservation awareness.
If you go back when I said we saw the hummingbird and said, that's the animal that we'll use as a vehicle to drive a conservation ethic maybe in Rockport and attempt to change people's behavior so that they begin to appreciate what they have here from a natural resource standpoint. That was the hope, and that every speaker in the early years always had a conservation message in their program. I'm not sure that has continued, or that what we had hoped for really has happened yet, where there is really a conservation ethic or a change in behavior has come out of the hummingbird celebration.
Here's a flower bud right there. See that?
Only time will tell whether ecotourism truly achieves its full potential. But as our urban populations grow, sprawl encroaches more and more on wild habitat. We cherish those pure and wild places that Thoreau and Muir wrote about, and they must be preserved and shared.
I find it extremely interesting that people in today's day and age, because of the stresses and strains of everyday life, really look to find a place where they can recharge. And I think whether it's psychologically or spiritually, I think they all go together. I find the same thing happening in my own life. It's a place to pull away and to marvel at what surrounds us. I think the more we delve into the natural world, the more we are amazed. There's just so much out there. We could spend lifetimes just studying one particular species, let alone the biodiversity that we face down here, whether it's plants or animals or mammals or reptilian goodies and the like, birds, for example. I just love being out there and to see what's available to us, to recharge our batteries, to bring us back into a sense of focus, and to realize what are the important things in our life. The more we are enhanced in that regard, I think the more we can look at the rest of our world and realize what we have to do out there.